Good afternoon, everybody. I am Prashant Udrani, conference producer for the annual investment meeting. AIM is the largest investment platform in the world, an initiative of the UAE Ministry of Economy. AIM has been promoting a healthier global economy by linking investment opportunities to fast-growing economies under 5 key pillars: foreign direct investment, foreign portfolio investment, small and medium enterprise, startups, and future cities, with a special event, Belt and Road Initiative. On behalf of AIM and GSMA, we would like to thank you all for joining us today. The webinar will be focusing on emerging technologies, innovations, and investment trends. We will be discussing the trends and technologies that will be underpinning innovative smart city solutions, including 5G, AI, IoT, and advanced mapping techniques. Know the impact and outlook of smart city solutions on key sectors such as transport, public safety, healthcare, and utilities, discovering emerging funding models and investment opportunities in smart city initiatives. Just a few housekeeping rules before we get started. If you are experiencing any issues with your audio or video during the webinar, just refresh your browser and that should take care of everything. We would suggest using Chrome, Firefox, or Opera. During the webinar, if you have any questions, please type them in the question box in the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. We will try to cover all your questions during the webinar. If the question is addressed to a particular speaker, please do mention their name at the start of the question. We will be running live polls located right beside the question tab. We'd request you to engage and cast your votes. Now I would like to introduce our moderator for today, Kenchi Okeleke, who is the Senior Manager, GSMA Intelligence. He has been a telecom and IT industry analyst for more than 12 years, leading research across a wide range of topics, including tech innovations, 5G, AI, IoT, and big data. He has been responsible for producing insights and in-depth reports on key industry trends and developments across emerging regions. We are glad to have Kenchi join us. We look forward to an insightful and interactive webinar. Over to you, Kenchi.
Thank you so much for the introduction. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the AIM 2020 webinar series. I hope you are keeping safe wherever you are at this difficult time. Thanks to technology, we can still stay in touch and continue to share insights on topical issues as we're going to be doing today. Now, this edition of the webinar series is hosted by the GSMA. I will be talking about key technologies, innovation, and investment trends that will underpin the development of future smart cities. We have a great lineup of speakers to help us through these issues today. We are joined on the virtual stage by Yusuf Khalili. He's a senior partner at UAE and UAE General Manager at NXN Group, which is a thought leader in smart cities and next generation innovation technologies. Triska Hamid is an editorial director at Wanda, a platform integrated programs that aims to accelerate entrepreneurship ecosystems throughout the Mena region. And Mohammed Al Mazuki is a VP at Etisalat International. But before we kick off, allow me to introduce the GSMA for the benefit of those who may be hearing about us for the first time. The GSMA represents the interest of mobile operators worldwide and drives industry programs that add value to the digital economy. We have offices in every region around the world, and the team in the Middle East and North Africa region is led by Jawad Abasi. Please feel free to engage with them to learn more about our activities in the region. Also visit the GSMA Mena website and the GSMA Intelligence website for more information on our activities and research on key issues, including 5G, AI, and IoT. Now to our topic today. Now, the concept of smart cities has been around for quite some time now. In fact, the phrase smart city was coined in the early 1990s to illustrate the use of technology and innovation in urban development. but we're likely going to see a significant increase in interest in the implementation of smart city initiatives over the next decade. Now, what's the reason for this? Well, the primary reason I would suggest is population growth and the resulting pressures this is putting on urban settlement. So according to the UN, 60% of the world's population will live in cities with at least 500,000 inhabitants in just 10 years' time. Now, this comes with its own challenges and expectations, and I have highlighted a few of them for you on the slide. The need to maximize the utilization of scarce resources, the increasing demand for better quality services by citizens, and of course, growing calls to protect the environment and tackle climate change. Now, this is all happening at a time when connectivity and new technologies are increasingly transforming the way we live, work, communicate, and even play. And so with this backdrop, I'm now going to invite our speakers who are going to share their thoughts on the current state of play and what to expect from future smart cities. Our first speaker today is Yusuf Khalili. As I mentioned previously, he's the UAE General Manager at NXN Group and Head of Global Digital Government Practice. Yusuf.
Hi, thanks, Kenji. I'm very glad to be here with you. It's quite refreshing to be back in action and communicate and hear from people and discuss things. So I'm very thankful for the invite to be with you, for the organizers, and welcome everybody from everywhere. So the discussion is about the future of smart cities and the impact that we have moving forward in 2020, and especially after the current situation. I'd like to first introduce myself. I'm managing the United Arab Emirates for my company NXN, who's a specialist in AI, data, and digital transformation. I'm also managing the global practice for digital government for the company. So if we'd like to move to the next slide. The subject of the topic today is the new tomorrow. So with all the things that are happening today, people are asking, do we go back to where we were, or is it where it is now? And the answer pretty much is that today is the new tomorrow. So by learning to embrace this new digital norm, we actually adjust. And my objective is to show you how. So let's start by discussing what's a smart city. By leveling for everybody, what's the definition of a smart city? A smart city is basically an innovative digital city. So where we use information or ICT to improve the quality of life, efficiency for the operations, and economic and social environment. How do we deliver that? We deliver that by proliferating the ICT and bringing the data together to serve all the industries you see. So whether it's education on impact on education, on banking, on healthcare, on public sector, transportation, by using ICT, we can transform those industries. So what we do here, how do we go about building a smart city? So first we need to set a smart city master plan. By setting the master plan, we put the governance model and we put the vision and the mission and the strategy for the city. But we also put a lot of policies in place and standards on how stakeholders can interact and how data is governed in the city. And we put a roadmap for transformation. The next thing is we build a digital platform. So by building a digital platform, we build the central brain of the city. The central brain of the city is where the action happens. And this is where data is orchestrated and then presented for analytics. But then we move into really adding the value and touching the lives of people by offering digital services. And here the key secret is not each industry offering its own services, but basically offering a connected layer of services that are interconnected and seamless. So if these three elements work well, then we would have delivered on a good project of a smart city or a smart nation for that matter. So what's the challenge here? So the challenge is actually this ICT discussion we've mentioned. And to bring all those services, this catalog of services, you can imagine the complexity across the various industries. So it's cool if each agency and each private sector agency as well, not just public sector, offers those smart parking, electric vehicles, smart environment, education, banking. It's cool, but really the value comes to the constituent by having the integration layer. And it's different maturity levels for different smart cities. So if you just offer those catalog services in isolation, it's a good start. But then what happens next? So I'm going to share with you some of the challenges and some of the opportunities. So to offer those, you need a digital platform, as I mentioned. And a digital platform has different functional components. And a lot of those components could be just basic components in terms of building infrastructure and scaling the connectivity, as you could see on the left side of the slide. But where it really gets exciting is when you move to the right side with the advanced technologies. So with AI, blockchain, algorithms, machine learning, and many other conversational bots and RPA, comes a lot of interesting opportunities, but also challenges. And the secret here is that while those individual technology solutions are relatively simple to secure, it's or to source, it's the underlying integration across both the basic or cloud and big data technologies and the advanced technologies that will really make a big difference. And then if we look at why is this important? So why it's important for smart cities? It's important because those disruptive advanced technologies will support the evolution of business models, new business models. So while you could think of the mentality before was, let's build it and they will come. Let's basically be ready and then we will find the customers. In the current situation, and as we will discuss later in the slides, this will not any longer be the case. Moving from a classic business model to a new business model because of those disruptive advanced technologies, and moving from basic digital services I mentioned before to cognitive services is the future. And you can see the technologies here in the middle, and those technologies will work together to build the new blueprint of a smart city. And it's not just about technology impact on us as constituents, but it's about how it's forcing the whole procurement process to change. It's how it's sourcing the whole demand and supply equations to change. Because you could imagine that customers, and we're starting to see this as a company with our customers, by suggesting, yeah, let's build this platform and then find out how we can basically generate services from it. The question is, no, I will do it service by service. And you have to provision the necessary infrastructure and cloud for it. But more importantly, let's discuss the more advanced technologies and see if we can partner on those. So that's this discussion we have not had before, and that's a discussion that's going to continue to mature as we move. Now, some companies, obviously, there's a lot of those predictions that happened before COVID-19, and this is a famous graph by Gartner around the curve and the basically how the 5 stages of adoption of technology from an innovation all the way to a plateau. And you could see here that some of those technologies have barely just made it through the curve. And the question now, and we're going to ask the audience in a second, is can those technologies that are just about to rise or reach the peak, or the ones that at the peak, like 5G, as you can see, or the ones that just made it to the next stage, can they continue to be on that path? Or maybe some of the early ones, you can see in the beginning of the graph, have actually now ascended very, very fast to become more important to the transformation. And this shift is interesting. Why is it interesting in the context of future cities or smart cities? Because that's where the investment will happen. So, you go and knock the door for a government transportation agency or a public sector municipality or a police organization, and you will hear just in a month or two, you are hearing a different story altogether in terms of where they want to spend and what they want to spend their money on. So here I wanted, I don't know if the technology is ready, but I wanted actually to hear from you what you think are those shifts. So there is a poll, I understand, where we're going to put some of those, and I want to hear if you agree with my thinking that some of those technologies are actually the order of those technologies and the acceleration of adoption of those technologies will change. Are we ready for the poll? The poll is up. Which of the following technologies do you expect to continue their trends on the innovation cycle after COVID-19? Please go to the poll section on the right panel and pick only those that you think that will actually continue to make it through the curve, please. Okay. So, what are the trends that we expect? So the short to midterm trends after COVID-19 that are expected from multiple sources are that, first of all, no big surprise, projects will be prioritized based on outcome and value. All non-essential spending will be stopped. As a company operating in this region and around the world, we see this already. The discussion now with people with budgets is to say we've been asked to prioritize, and prioritization, by the way, does not necessarily mean spending just on essential expenditure. No, there is investment in IT. So there's investment, as we see it, both in the infrastructure, so basically strengthening the pipe and the connectivity. We all face this at home as we continue to face sound and video issues while our kids are working on their homeworks. But more importantly, basically stuff that will help with decision making. So that's being more and more prioritized. AI and machine learning projects to automate and scale client interactions is now key, because sitting back and not being in the front with using humans, now contact centers, virtual assistants, and chatbots are key to actually scale the contact with clients and vendors. Data analytic projects for better informed decision makings, as I said, for both planning and forecasting of supply chain, but also mitigating risks and understanding risks better. Cloud services, back to basics, but here the change is how the cloud services are being consumed, and whether you just buy credits upfront or basically you consume as you go. Application development, a surge of front-end window shops. Everybody wants an app now. Traditional businesses finding themselves not able to open up in the various industries suddenly will accelerate any project that's to do with app development and having a mobile app or even a proper website that can do communication. And then finally, of course, e-commerce. Everything will be sold online, everything we know from a service or a product. And everybody is now suddenly waking up to the fact that we don't have that capability. We need to have it yesterday. So the results of the poll came, and 5G, it seems, is the winner. It seems 5G investments, people are thinking, will continue, followed by IoT, and then by autonomous driving. Not much voting for Edge AI, and Edge Analytics got actually 0. Okay, interesting stuff. So I'll tell you about those two, Edge Analytics and Edge AI, together with IoT. By the way, they're kind of well entangled together. are going to be very key. And it's very key for multiple reasons. One is because decisions need to happen real time at the edge. So please read more about that, and that's the way forward. So whether it's edge AI or analytics, doesn't matter, but those two branches powered by a proper IoT strategy and gateway and sensors are going to be key. And I think they are not well represented here. So I would encourage you to go and find more about those. Okay, so now as we emerge from COVID, who are the winners and who are the losers? So here are some predictions, famous ones from Gartner's, but also confirmed by others. So the ICT industry, so anybody within this industry, we're fortunate to be part of that industry. We're still yet to see the demand ramping up as we expect, but we see good signs. Anybody in the ICT industry should be a winner if they have a right strategy. So we could see that the industry will, the industries will buy unified communications, mobile app development, data centers, security, virtual machines to enable remote workers. And you will see that this remote work and collaboration is really making a big difference. I know people in big companies who used to, to sell advanced security and data centers. They're telling me, Yusuf, we've been selling nothing but laptops for the last 2 months because simply organizations woke up to the fact that employees are no longer coming to the office and they need to give them laptops or iPads or tabs or what have you. The education sector also will emerge to be a winner for two things, because education is mandatory. So it's not like you're not going to consume education, like you would choose not to consume luxury goods, for instance. But also because now they are forced to being pushed to transform and deliver online really in no time, and big technology companies help them. But they are being also regulated by the governments to do that. So they will emerge in a way whereby they're offering online. There will be a hybrid model where they will save on their costs and they will continue to scale and reach more people. Healthcare, obviously it's a pandemic. So the healthcare, we could see that every second hospital in town, is launching every day a new initiative when it comes to virtual care, telehealth, remote patient monitoring. Those solutions that are depending on advanced technologies are being more and more used, and the investments will continue in that space. The thing that is happening today is a quick subscription to these kind of cloud systems or cloud services. I think moving forward, once things settle down, healthcare organizations or hospitals and healthcare providers will start understanding how they can utilize the power of a platform that will build upon data from various sources to offer value to patients, not just to address a COVID situation or not being able to reach the clinic. Public sector across all its branches is a winner because again it will we need all to consume public sector services, so it's not like an option. So as they become agile and nimble and more modernized, they will save much more cost and be able to scale with better services. And now we are seeing that suddenly public sector organizations are kind of forced, but in a good way, to share data and to offer one view to the citizen or the visitor. So these were the winners. And then if we would look at the potential losers, so banking and insurance. Here, banking and insurance, they have, of course, fintech and insurtech are two trends that will continue to help banks to transform. But the industry will invest in certain surveillance, SaaS, unified communication, chatbots, fantastic. But some of the negative outcomes is non-essential technology will not be bought. So and then there is an impact on insurance companies in terms of consumption models. As we said before, You will not be people will not be spending money upfront and waiting for returns. They will buy as they need, and they need to evaluate their distribution and supply chain risks. This is a risk for the banking sector globally, and of course, in terms of crisis, people tend to keep their money or invest in non-banking assets, so like loans, taking loans, and others. Now, manufacturing also tend to be part of the losers for many reasons related to access to labor and resources. But if you look at China, with the lion's share of manufacturing is affected, and this whole cycle of manufacturing is going to have ripple effects because of huge costs in the infrastructure, and the supply chain is being disrupted. Retail obviously is already suffering. E-commerce will help a lot in mitigating some of those risks. But this segment will suffer, particularly with the exposure to the supply chain issues. Transportation, and specifically travel, is a no-brainer. That I have friends who are telling me after COVID, we're not too sure anymore how we're going to be on a plane sitting next to somebody, with 10 centimeters away. So there will be an interesting question mark around how this industry will recover from the situation. And we have a poll here to hear from you, and this is my last slide, around which ones of these industries you agree or disagree that will be winners or losers. So the poll is already up. Which sectors do you expect to come out stronger after COVID-19? So please vote now. So vote for the ones you think only would come stronger. Please, maybe limit it to 2. Okay, I think the results are coming as we speak. So far, the winner is, I don't know if everybody can see the results, but at least I can see them. So healthcare is 36%, ICT 31%, 35, 35, 30, and then education. So these are the big 3. So people agree that banking and manufacturing and retail. So the interesting one is public sector. So public sector has not been voted as a winner, as an emergent winner. So that's an interesting one to. So you differ here that public sector is actually a winner. Interesting insight. And that's all from my side. Thanks for listening, and I hope this was worth of your time.
Thank you very much, Youssef. Very, very insightful, I would say. We will be taking questions from the live audience after the keynote. We have a couple of questions. If you go to the right hand of your screen between chat and polls, you can post your questions there. You can also vote for questions that you want to move up to the top, and we'll make all efforts to answer all those after all 3 presentations. So our next speaker is Triska Hamid. She's editorial director at WAMDA, and today she'll be talking to us about startup and investment trends. Triska, over to you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So I have been covering telecoms and technology for more than 10 years now in the region, and these past couple of years I've been focusing on startups. And I'm going to talk about the startup ecosystem in the Middle East and North Africa and what's been happening. Now, when the conversations first started around smart cities in the region, startups were never part of that conversation. The ecosystem was just too small. Back then, anyone who had their own company or business was simply a businessman or a businesswoman. Entrepreneurship was a buzzword. But as governments across the region recognized startups and SMEs as key drivers of job growth, of innovation, and a way to diversify their economies, they made very concerted efforts to establish entrepreneurship ecosystems in the region. And that includes the startups themselves, the governments and their initiatives, and easing of regulations to enable people to found businesses with relative ease. And we've seen a proliferation of investors all the way from angel to VCs. And alongside all of this, we've seen third-party enablers like accelerators and incubators. So I wanted just go over what's been happening over the past 10 years and outline some of the trends. The entrepreneurship drive really kicked off back in 2009 when Yahoo acquired Maktub for $164 million. Maktub was an email and content platform for the Arab world. And that was the seminal moment when people thought, there's money to be made in the digital space. And so we saw the emergence of investors soon after that. And then accelerators began to emerge, and the traditional offline businesses were going to online, so jobs boards, classifieds, the beginning of e-commerce in the region. And this was happening in line with developments in the mobile broadband technology. So when 4G launched, and the cost of mobile broadband went down, smartphone penetration went up, we saw a rise in the number of startups throughout the region. And it attracted the attention of global investors as well. So we had a few more exits. Dubizzle, one of the first classifieds, was acquired eventually for $400 million by Naspers, which is based in South Africa. Germany's Rocket Internet really came to the region and started building up startups here, all very much e-commerce focused. And then Careem, our ride-hailing startup based out of the UAE, was valued at $1 billion when it raised $350 million in 2016. This was our first and remains the only unicorn. Back in 2016, Saudi Arabia also launched its Economic Vision 2030, and entrepreneurship is a key pillar of that economic plan. I'd say that the other seminal moment in the region was when Amazon acquired Souk in 2017 for $680 million. And that validated not only e-commerce in the Middle East, but also entrepreneurship. And one common criticism that people usually have of the startup space in the Middle East is that it's very consumption driven. There's no real innovation. The startups that we see emerging are primarily in the e-commerce space. This is true, but had we not had these kind of startups emerge that have enabled the logistical side of things, the fintech, the backbone infrastructure, we'd all be hard pressed to get our groceries and all our other needs today. So the biggest story over the past 10 years was when Uber acquired Careem for $3.1 billion. In terms of the investment and where that money's coming from, KPMG predicted that smart city tech investment in the Middle East and Africa would reach $2.7 billion by 2022. I'm not quite sure how that's going to be impacted after COVID, but a lot of this is driven by both Dubai and Riyadh. FDI for smart city related tech like artificial intelligence and robotics reached 21.6 billion in Dubai alone between 2015 and 2018. Now, I imagine that a lot of these investments don't consider the amount that goes into startups, but last year the Mena startups raised $704 million in 564 deals. Now, the number of deals increased compared to 2018, but the actual amount invested decreased. So we see that, I'm going to go to the next slide, most of these investment deals were in the UAE, and Egypt came second. And in blue, you see the investment value of the 704 million. 19% of that went into delivery and transportation. And this was driven primarily by Swivel, the bus booking application in Egypt. You can see real estate, e-commerce, financial technology, and renewable energy. 5 years ago, the e-commerce and delivery and transportation would have been the top. Now we're seeing a slight shift. Earlier this year, WAMDA did a report on the state of pre-seed startups in the region. Now, pre-seed are those that are at the idea stage or they've just launched their product. They haven't raised significant amounts of investment. And it's important to track these trends because these are the startups that will be emerging and coming to market. So it's a good gauge of where the sector is headed in its entirety. Again, e-commerce and classifieds and marketplace continue to dominate, but we've seen a rise in software, fintech, health tech, and edtech. And we imagine this to increase far more after COVID. Like I said, the majority of startups are based in Dubai. It is the business hub of the region. It has the most amount of varied talent, and it's where all the investors are. And then followed by that is Egypt. And what's interesting between the two ecosystems is the Egyptian startups really cater to their own market, and they try and find solutions for the problems that they face. And a lot of it is infrastructure problems. So Cairo has become a global testbed for mobility solutions. It's where Careem and Uber both launched their bus services. We've got Swivel, which I mentioned earlier, Buseat, which does the same thing, bus booking, and Halan, which is for scooters. So they're meeting the demands of a sector of society that can't afford the ride hailing, the cab service, and are a cut above in terms of socioeconomically speaking, the public transportation system. So let me go to the next one. These startups are primarily being funded by the founders themselves. The check sizes are around $5,000 to $50,000. We're seeing friends and family, but the VC side and angel side of investment is quite limited. And if we are to see a growth in the number of startups or in the more innovative space and deep technologies and AI, blockchain, we need more investment at the earlier stages because these kind of startups require a lot of research, and they just do not have access to the kind of funding, nor do the investors in the region have the level of expertise really to invest in deep tech, which would enable smart city innovation. Now, it would be a disservice to only talk about Dubai. Like I said, Cairo is doing amazing things with regards to mobility. Jordan is doing incredible things with renewable energy. Its mosques are amongst the most green in the world. Saudi has NEOM. Bahrain has an incredible e-government infrastructure. But really, the government that has made the most concerted effort to bring investors and startups and the government together is Dubai under the Smart Dubai initiative. And that's a government entity that brings together several others. The main one is Dubai Future Foundation, which also handles the Dubai Future Accelerators, the Blockchain Challenge, part of the Future Blockchain Summit, and I forgot to put in the Dubai Smart City Accelerator. These government entities offer support, training, and access to government departments and governments. So they bring in startups from around the world and test their technologies with various government entities, allowing a smart government and hence a smart city. The only downside to this is that the focus is very much on bringing in technology from around the world. And so there are startups that kind of are overlooked in the region. And the engagement with investors really comes when it comes to the pitch day. So that's when the startups are put in front of the investors and they do their demos and pitches, and the investors in the region decide whether to invest with these startups or not. This model also has a risk with regards to the government becoming a competitor. In Saudi Arabia, in the UAE, the government does launch its own services. Most recently, we had the Dubai Road and Transport Authority bringing in technology from a New York-based company to launch its on-demand bus service. If there was a more coherent or cohesive relationship with the investors, they would have been able to know that there is already a startup based in Dubai doing this, has been doing this for a year, called Caravan. So there is a risk when governments get involved a bit too much. It can prevent innovation at a certain level. So that's pretty much my overview.
Thank you very much, Triska. Just before I introduce Mohammed, can you just keep your questions coming? We've got quite a few up there already, and I can see, there's already a conversation going on, between yourself answering some of the questions. We're still going to raise some of them, for general discussions after the last presentation, but keep your questions coming. Also going to mention that we will have a few more questions that will come after this presentation on the live poll. So get ready to answer those when they come up. So I'm now going to invite Mohammed Al Mazuki. He's VP at Etisalat International, and he is going to share some insights on the role of mobile operators in the smart city landscape. Mohammed, over to you.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me in this conference. My name is Mohammed Al Marzouki, VP Mobile Operations Support in Etisalat International. We in Etisalat International supervise the work and the operation in 16 countries where Etisalat operate today. We have Etisalat considered one of the top 10 telecom groups in the world. We operate in Asia, Middle East, and Africa. So if we start the presentation, my presentation, I'll keep it simple, straight to the point, because I believe most of us now, we know what's a smart city. But I'll be more than happy to receive your questions later on. So I will start with talking about what telecom operators are doing today to serve the purpose of smart cities. And this is not only Etisalat, I believe all the telecom operators in the world, they are committed since they want to invest in the mobile technology to provide connectivity for the end users. This was done in 2G, technology in the 3G, where the data era started, and then 4G, and now with the 5G. All the telecom operators as well are committed and investing heavily in the fiber connectivity, which is a must nowadays to have a secured connectivity and with the required bandwidth. Also, all the telecom operators, I believe, are investing today and committed to invest in the new technologies coming to the picture, such as Internet of Things, the IoT, or the artificial intelligence, the AI. And we in Etisalat are using those tools since now a couple of years, and we noticed that it can enhance the efficiency in our activities, it can enhance the customer experience, and definitely it can also add value to our business portfolio. Regarding the 5G, I saw a couple of questions about the 5G. As a telecom operator, we believe that 5G definitely will support and enhance the experience of the smart cities and will make things much easier. But also I need to highlight to the audience that 5G is not the only tool available today in the market. Smart cities can work fine with 4G. And the current 5G, what do we have it today commercially in the markets, because the world, it's not the actual 5G. The actual 5G will be ready and commercially available everyone at the end of this year. The current 5G, which is available commercially, is just
I think we are facing some technical issues with Mohammed's presentation. We'll just get him back for his presentation.
Okay, while we wait for Mohammed to come back on, maybe we use this opportunity to answer a few questions from the first two presentations that we've had. And if I can just ask that we put up the poll on the impact COVID-19 might have on smart cities, because there's been a few questions on that. I'm just going to throw it to Yusuf and Triska. So do we expect what is going on now, how do we expect this to impact the evolution of smart cities? Do we expect to see an acceleration of interest and investment? Do we expect to see a slowdown, or is there likely going to be no change? How do you expect COVID-19 to impact on the evolution of smart cities going forward?
I can go first, Yusuf. What we see from the investment community is that a lot of investors are very hesitant. And also, I think it's important to bear in mind that investors are not kind of looking at where to put their money based on a smart city agenda. That's what the government does. Investors look at market trends. They're looking at what's happening. They look at the company accounts, the founders themselves, and then they decide where to put their money. So it isn't a smart city initiative that's driving it. As Yusuf mentioned, the winners, we're going to see a rise in health tech and ed tech. So from that kind of aspect, it will accelerate investments, but others will die off. Another area actually is agriculture. We've seen, particularly in the GCC, where about 90% of the food is imported, a concerted effort by investors to they've invested in smart farming. So I think this has positioned everyone to kind of change the way they look at what's happening and what will happen. Investors are very keen on COVID resilient or pandemic resilient startups now, and they happen to be startups that enable smart cities. So it's a bit of both, really.
Okay, and we can see that accelerate investments and new applications is currently winning on our live poll. Yusuf, does this come as a surprise to you?
Not at all. I'm fully aligned. I was saying ladies first, but I was muted, so I'm glad she responded. Yeah, we're fully aligned. It's a bit of both. As I said, the fundamental elements of the building blocks of smart cities are different, and then also the industries that make up the complete picture are different. So there will be winners and losers, as we showed. I answered already a couple questions like, will we see smart cities going on? Yes, aspects of smart cities, but not full master plans of like, yeah, let's do it all. It will be, I think, moving forward quite surgical. The sectors, the transformation that need to be driven in retail around e-commerce, around fintech and insurtech in those two industries, education, edutech, and obviously the point not many people voted for, but public sector. I think a huge impact is already we're seeing on the government. They suddenly woke up. I deal with governments every day. We've been fortunate to be behind multiple flagship smart city, smart nation projects. And I'll tell you, big wake up call to governments that their resilience is crucial and will depend on two things: bringing data together now from all aspects, and then do something about the data. That's in the core of transformation of any city and any government. And that's happening as we speak, because all governments around the world at various levels of maturity have realized this, that they were not ready. They cannot take, they're crippled. They cannot take decisions today as they should because of the lack of integrated data layer. And I'll tell you, 90% of the problems of transformation of, I started back in the days before losing my hair with the e-government projects. So it's been always the theme, the failure of e-government, then smart government, digital government, and now smart cities and smart nation has been always the fact that the data could not be gathered and shared for magic to happen, and the public sector will happen. So yeah, so those sectors will take place. Then from a technology point of view, when I said ICT, and it's kind of voted number 2 also by people, again, I would say that that transformation of smart cities will happen at the infrastructure. So telcos like Mohammed's company here will stand to gain a lot. Well, after waking up, at least from the situation, will gain a lot to in terms of scaling the cloud and the infrastructure to the right levels and introducing 5G and others. But then on top, the technologies, the advanced technologies, the standard day-to-day technologies will be deprioritized. Secure, scaling the network, scaling the infrastructure, securing the infrastructure, and then doing really cool stuff at the edge. Really cool stuff. That's where the investments will happen from a technology point of view.
Thank you so much, Yusuf. As we can see, Mohammed is back with us now. So we're just going to finish up with his presentations, and we'll continue back with questions. Over to you, Mohammed.
Hi, welcome. Okay, so can you move forward to the next slide, please? This is the challenges. I believe Yusuf already covered those one. The next slide. Now go back. Yeah, okay. There is one point which I think the GSMA need to work with us, not only the telecom, everyone involved in this game, is the definition of a smart city. What is a smart city? Everyone is talking about smart city, but am I living in a smart city? And there is a kind of ranking from 1 to 100 for a smart city. What is my city score? I believe if you check, for example, the World Health Organization, if you check for their website, you can find the health sector situation and performance in each country in the world. And this can give you a good idea about the health sector. If you are planning to travel to this country to work there, you need to check this kind of indicators. If you are an investor in the health sector, I think you'll be interested to know which countries are not doing well, and you might be interested in those countries. So I believe we need such kind of organization to highlight what are the main indicators for any smart city and give a weight for those indicators. And based on that, we can know. We as a telecom operator, what do we need to do? The government, what do they need to do? The private sectors, what do they need to do? And the investors, which opportunities they will be looking for those smart cities. I believe this initiatives needs support from all the entities today working with the smart cities, government, private sectors, international organization, and definitely will be also willing to participate in this initiatives.
Okay, thank you so much, Mohammed. So we're going to continue now with questions. Keep them coming online. But I'm going to start with you, Mohammed. And there's a very important point I think would be good to address on this webinar. So looking at various smart city initiatives by Etisalat, one thing that really jumps out is the partnerships the company has formed with various public and private organizations. In your view, and of course other speakers can jump in afterwards, how important are these partnerships to a Etisalat Smart City strategy, and how important are partnerships in general to smart city developments and innovations?
Okay, it's a good question. I believe that the telecom sector is just one part of the engine of the smart cities. Those other partnerships is a must. For example, partnership with the government or the private sector, with the IoT providers, and solution with the AI solution providers. It's a must. So we start in the telecom sector having a relationship with all those entities. We start using our international experience across the world and share this experience with the government, what other governments are doing, and we share it with the private sectors. How is the other private sectors in other countries are working and performing. We start introducing the IoT service provider to the government and to the private sectors. We run all the technical tasks for those IoT service providers to ensure that their devices is compatible with the network and can just be plugged and be used at any time. Also, we start also sharing our international experience regarding the changes required in the organization itself, because smart city initiative itself needs a lot of changes in the organization, the private and the government. And we in Etisalat, for example, we established a digital unit before 10 years. We established a unit of AI before 5 years. I believe all these changes needs to be done across all the levels.
So I'd like to address Mohammed's point around the definition of a smart city and unified. I think you were referring to a probably standard maturity model for smart cities, where there's a ranking from a kind of an unbiased organization. So that effort has been a challenge as we worked with multiple smart cities. We saw a lot of benchmark reports that cities sponsor with universities, and suddenly ranks the city as number one for the unforeseen future. And of course, this needs to stop. So there are two efforts I'd like to mention. One is that started with the ITU, an organization well known to you, Muhammad, as a part of the telecom, and an effort, more recent one by ISO. So there is a technical standard that's on its way out that actually is a living maturity model for cities. It's been taken at least 2 years with multiple pilot cities. We had the pleasure to be representing the United Arab Emirates and specifically the city of Dubai on behalf of Smart Dubai as a consultant of Smart Dubai. And we've contributed our own thinking and IP of that effort into the technical committee, which has been welcomed and adopted, but quite non-biased, quite clear, and takes through an evolution of multiple stages. So that's coming up, but it's a challenge. I agree with you too.
It's a challenge, and it's well known to you and to me as we are working on these initiatives, but to public, it's not yet. So this is what I wish. And for the investors, this is very important.
Okay, true.
Cool. All right, thanks for that. Before we move on, does anyone want to, talk about the importance of partnerships going forward?
I didn't catch that. Can you repeat?
Yeah, I was just asking, does anyone want to talk about the importance of partnerships in smart city initiatives and solutions going forward?
I'm happy to do that. If Triska, do you have anything to say, or shall I go?
I'll go after you if I need to.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, this is the big thing, Kenji. This is absolutely what's making it or breaking it with cities. In many benchmark studies we've done around the world on behalf of clients from the region, we noticed that successes have been recorded when there is a proper partnership between the public sector and the private sector. And it doesn't have to be a full partnership, PPP model, complicated and all of that, but at least the baseline is, and we'd like to see more of that happening in this region. The baseline is when governments stay as governments and as regulators and do not compete with the private sector. This has been serious when governments step in and take the role of the private sector. So just the first thing you can do is just let the private sector flourish. Okay, if you don't want to help out, at least leave them flourish. And then secondly, hopefully, actually do partnership with the private sector, where instead of you going and doing the service yourself, try to source the service from the experts. So there have been amazing examples in this region around, organizations going to the private sector startups and saying, you know what, we're not going to do this service. You're going to do it. We're going to share revenue with you. We're going to give you this privilege. Okay, so we're going to kind of tax you for giving you this privilege, but at least we're not going to replicate it. That's perfect. The ecosystem, the health of the ecosystem between the public and the private sector is really what's going to drive and make this initiative thrive. Otherwise, if the government thinks that they can do it all, they will do it for a while, but they just come from a different school altogether, and it's not going to be sustainable. That's my thinking. Trishka, I know you're passionate about this.
I mean, yeah, I agree. I think it's really important for the government to play the role of the government, which is the regulation side of things, not to become a player. It's a little bit like, and I don't know how much Muhammad's going to like this, but back in the day when the telcos were, they had their app stores, they were trying to be Netflix and YouTube and game providers. It didn't work well. You need the private sector to be able to innovate and not have to compete. In terms of partnerships, really one of the questions that I've seen on the poll is what needs to be done, the top things that needs to be done for the startup community to thrive. And really investment, but also the role of the education institutes and R&D. With this pandemic, what we've seen is there is a need to increase R&D at the school and the university level in order to create the talent and in order to be able to innovate and test out new ideas. We can't keep relying on the outside world to bring in these technologies. We need to develop them locally. And right now there are hackathons that are being held all around the world, and startups in the region are responding. And they are, we've got 3D printing startups that are now responding to the crisis in 3D printing shields and masks and ventilator parts. The government can't do that. So there needs to be partnerships, but done in the right way.
Okay, thanks for that. I'm going to throw in an audience question now. Can you share any insights about established smart cities and measures taken so far to control this pandemic? Anyone wants to jump in? So I guess this is, what learnings can we get from from different smart cities around the world, or different cities where the governments are using technology, to address, this pandemic? What lessons can we learn from them?
So without embracing or saying it's good or bad as a government or as a city, because we might have our differences on how cities are managed or governed, but obviously China has done amazing. I mean, you've seen videos, everybody has seen videos for good or bad reasons for the control measures that were put in place. The technology helped a lot in monitoring and then controlling the pandemic in Wuhan and elsewhere. So there have been amazing use cases that are now being exported to the rest of the world. Now, going back to this analytics and data and edge analytics and AI, a lot of that is being done in sophisticated cities where modeling and prediction models are being put in place based on the movement of people and who met who and who traveled from where to where, using telco data for that matter, but other data as well. predicting what's going to happen in the next week, next month, and so forth. But there are a few initiatives also in this part of the world where applications were launched, maybe simpler ones, but just to make sure that people are being tracked or quarantined at home and so forth. So my own humble opinion is that the world did not catch up with this situation as it should, and was not ready, and was taken by surprise when it comes to using existing technologies and moving fast in an agile way. What really what we're seeing is a lot of government agencies, they want some, still in the mentality of, hey, give me a cool app or give me nice features to, track people, or if two people touch each other mobiles, with Bluetooth, then we know that they've met and maybe one of them is sick. Yeah, cool, that's okay. I mean, Facebook was using that 4 years ago. Like, I went to an event and then next day I get a suggestion that I need to add that friend because we met yesterday, right? So how are those technologies are going to be used now? An architecture, a blueprint of managing this as a resilient government needs to be put in place. We haven't seen that thinking, to be honest, so far, at least in this part of the world, when it comes to a full blueprint. I'm talking about technology, not necessarily a health blueprint, but a full technological blueprint in terms of what do we need to do at the infrastructure, and then at the data, and then at the various enablers, and then at the applications. The thinking have been so far, and I might be mistaken, it's just my interactions around applications, around mobile apps or tracking devices, but not necessarily the full stack. So you see the tip above the water, the iceberg tip, but not the whole iceberg. And I would say comfortably that I talk to most. We as a company, of course, we talk to most smart cities in the region, and they are at much lower level of readiness than some of the cities we've seen. But there are some cool initiatives, and I think cities in this region, in the Middle East and Africa, have an advantage because they're relatively new cities with amazing technologies being built just recently. If they get that whole blueprint and strategy, they can move faster. And leadership. So it depends. We've seen leaders moving very fast and ordering things. The fact that we have multiple, organizations now, for instance, in the UAE where I live, that are concerned with bringing people from data versus health versus technology and putting them all in one room with a command and control center is a great step. Now everything will fall in place. It might have been a little bit late, but maybe people did not realize it's going to actually accelerate to that level. But full bulletproof, solid example that a city has done it really well, a smart city has been ready and that did it really well. I think everybody agrees it's been only China so far.
All right, thanks for that, Yusuf. Triska, I have a question for you, but just before I ask that question, we're going to have another poll come up, and the poll is on 5G. And when we get the results to that poll, then Mohammed will probably, complete the thoughts that he was making previously on 5G before being cut off. Now, mindful, that we are over the 1 hour mark, but we're going to try to wrap this up in the next 10 minutes or so. So our speakers are going to be quite brief in their following responses. So Triska, there's a question here for you. What are the top must-do activities for startups in the ecosystem in Mena?
I saw this earlier actually, and I didn't really understand what they meant by top activities or must-do activities. But in order just for I'll talk generally about enabling the ecosystem to thrive. It is having an environment where startups can launch, go to market quite quickly, and that requires regulation, a friendly regulatory environment. Dubai is the hub of entrepreneurship in the region, but it's also one of the most expensive cities in the world to launch a startup. Another thing is you need the talent, you need cost-effective talent. So what's happening is startups will start off in Dubai, and then the back-end office will be based either in Jordan or Egypt, because the talent is there and it's far, far cheaper. We need investors. We need investors who understand beyond the consumption-driven business models. And what else do we need? I think the education side of things and the R&D side of things is incredibly important. This pandemic has shown the need to be able to be agile and to innovate and to have a local skill set and talent pool. I think globalization is probably going to shrink a little bit after this, and it'll be more important to be able to serve your needs locally. And so in order to do so, we need to amp up the R&D efforts in the region. Currently, throughout the Middle East, it's about 1% or less than 1% of the GDP that's invested in R&D. So it's all kind of mixed together, the education, the regulations, the startups themselves and the investors, they all kind of need to come together to be able to enable the ecosystem to thrive.
Thanks, Triska. Mohammed, 77% of respondents say 5G will be very important to the development of smart cities. What are your thoughts on this? Is this in line with what you expect?
No, I think the reason of this is that people start talking about smart cities and be aware about it with the introduction of 5G. So people thought that, okay, those two are linked together, but my answer as a telecom guy, no. Smart cities can be there, up and running, using the current technologies, and 5G definitely will enhance it. And 5G coming at the end soon will not enhance only the performance of the government, but also the business. The new 5G is designed mainly to support and serve the business sector. So back to the question, 5G is important, but smart cities can be established today across the world without it.
Okay, thanks, Mohammed. Now, there's a question here. When we talk about smart cities, it does require a lot of investment. Now, I guess this question has come from Africa, and the person is asking, do you think the African continent is in a position to implement smart city services and applications, or are we going to see a leapfrog effect? I don't know if anyone wants to take that up based on your experience.
African countries implementing smart cities, yeah, why not? There are actually 2 or 3 big projects that might eventually end up being lighthouses, within the Middle East and Africa region. It's African countries, from our discussions with them, it's smart cities have been mainly led by private investors who are taking concessions from the government to develop kind of a new green field smart city for like 99 years, and then bringing with them technology companies and others to monetize jointly. So it's kind of a PPP model. They have to convince others that this is going to be sustainable and it's going to be paying back their returns. But if done well, and I know a couple where I'm personally involved in as a firm, they might actually have the potential to become even better than some of the established other smart cities in the region.
There's a couple of questions here, around agriculture, and I must say it's one sector that we haven't talked much about, but in the days and times we live in, people have to eat, and somebody has made an interesting point here, that agriculture is coming out, as a big winner. How, does agriculture fit into the overall smart city landscape? anyone wants to?
I touched on it briefly, that the amount of investment going into smart agricultural agri-tech has risen. Just in the past couple of weeks, we saw the Abu Dhabi government invest $100 million in several agri-tech startups. Also, one Kuwaiti-based startup invested or made commitments of $120 million in pure harvest smart farming in their hydroponic farm. So there is a recognition from the governments, particularly in the GCC, that having food security is incredibly important, and they are actively investing now in agricultural technology. Yusuf, if you want to.
I was gonna say the same. I've read those news, and absolutely, I think, look, the decisions that everything is changing. So the population structure in some of our countries will change, obviously for geopolitical reasons. The investment agenda will change as a result. Also, the resourcing models will change. It's a huge shift, not just in the technology, but in the way alliances are being formed strategically also, and the fact that countries realize that they shouldn't rely on borders being open and being able to import. They will stand up on their feet in manufacturing agriculture. I answered a couple of questions that our countries need to seriously start considering that. I actually want to go one step further to say there is today competition. Let's discuss manufacturing. Manufacturing, there's a problem with China, right? So the Chinese manufacturing, first of all, they realize that they're putting their eggs in one basket, and then suddenly it's actually becoming more expensive than India or Vietnam or other countries. But then a question can be put on the table: why can't Abu Dhabi or Dubai or Jeddah or Khobar or Oman, Muscat be the next, manufacturing hub? Why not? Labor. So there's a discussion around, okay, is it really that hard now with the technology? To what extent? And if we invest in the technology, maybe labor is this needed and so forth. So, but that's changing. The manufacturing scene is changing for sure. And then Mexico, for instance, is emerging as a huge manufacturing opportunity now for American companies versus China. That's a great threat for China today. The likes of Apple and many companies are considering Mexico. Now, agriculture is the same. Here, it's even it's a problem of death or life. And agri-tech technology, some countries have been better than others in that. It's kind of, biotech and agri-tech are the next two things that are not necessarily being discussed a lot, but this is the next survival for the whole human race kind of agenda. And they now with this, they will definitely rise, and countries that like Abu Dhabi did and others that invest early on, they will acquire some huge IP that will become much more harder to acquire moving on.
Okay, thank you so much. Now we're going to run our last poll. It's on what we see as the main challenges to the development of smart city applications and initiatives. So if I can invite the audience to go to the polls tab and vote, and then the speakers will talk through the responses that we receive. But while that is going on, I'm going to talk about skills. A lot of the things we've talked about around technology require skills. Yusuf, I'll direct this to you, and anyone else can jump in afterwards. Where are we with the necessary skills and manpower required to support smart city development?
Yeah, excellent question. So when Muhammad mentioned the lack of maturity model that's neutral, actually the 4 pillars of the maturity model I mentioned earlier was talking about people and about skills, because we often think of smart cities as just high tech and and apps and all of that and connectivity. But at least so far, humans make up a big portion of what smart cities are all about, right? We as humans and skill sets we've noticed while dealing with multiple smart city projects around the region that the two big inhabitants for success of smart projects are actually skills and policies. I think it's in the poll, but they're not getting at least. Oh well, skills is getting number one at least so far, which is good. So followed by policies, a governing model and a policy to orchestrate and govern how stakeholders deal with each other. So skills in a ranking of the maturity model was a full pillar on its own. In the EU definition, EU Parliament definition, and UN definition of smart cities, Muhammad, to your reference. So the smart people comes as a big dimension in smart cities. And as a matter of fact, if you look at the blueprint of Smart Dubai or the vision of Smart Dubai, you will find that smart living, smart economy and smart environment, mobility, and there's smart people and smart government. Smart people is a big thing, and here comes a lot of initiatives around education, skill sets, bringing up, diversity between genders, diversity between different ethnic groups, and so forth. So that discussion is the non-tech discussion of any smart city. And if you look to what Riska showed before in terms of entrepreneurship, you will actually find a clear correlation between that pillar of a smart city and between the flourishing of an entrepreneurship ecosystem, which feeds the success of smart cities.
Okay, and from our polls, investment, has gone into the lead with 35%. Triska, does that come as a surprise to you?
Not at all. I mean, you can't get much done without having the money to do so. But this all comes together. You can't have one and not everything else. You can invest however much you want, but if you don't have the skills or the innovation to invest in, then where are you going to go?
Okay, and Mohammed, connectivity infrastructure. Well, in my view, connectivity pretty much is the foundation of every digital society. But I don't know if you want to talk a bit more, about how important this is, that operators continue to provide this infrastructure and connectivity. And beyond connectivity, are there any other assets that operators can bring to the table to support smart city development?
Well, yes, connectivity is a basic part of any operator activity, either through wireless network or the normal wire network. And yes, it's a must also, by the way, for having the best 5G experience. So we are focusing on enhancing our connectivity to the end users, to the government, to the private sectors. On top of that, introducing the IoT players in the market. We found that this is a big sector that can enhance the smart cities initiative. And as Yusuf mentioned, the database about the movement and the database collected from those smart cities and how can we use those database. This is missing. We believe the IoT can provide a huge amount of data and can be used to enhance the plan of the smart city and the future of the smart city. Not as a city itself, but also the population, the people living in that city. What we notice in the telecom is that the regulation kind of missing. For example, with the current network, can we have the car self-driving in our streets? Yes. Is it safe? Yes. The technology is there. The network is there to support it with the minimum delay up to less than 1 millisecond. But can I drive my car? Can I let it go and take me from point A to point B? Will I be covered by the law, for example? Will my insurance company cover me in that case? No. So those kind of regulation is still missing. And we are working jointly with the private sector and the government to close all those gaps in the big picture of the smart city.
Okay, thanks, Mohammed. Now, there's a couple of questions on the capabilities of 5G. I'm just going to, discuss that very briefly myself. So when we talk about 5G and, what capabilities it brings, the ones that really come to mind, will be high speed, high capacity, improved reliability, ultra low latency. And these features of 5G, have the potential to enable a wide range of new solutions, especially AI based and cloud based solutions. We've covered this topic in a great deal in many of our reports out there, so feel free to get in touch and I can share some of those with you. Now, I'm mindful of the fact that we're out of time, so we're going to begin to wrap this up. I'm going to ask the speakers in 30 seconds, no more than 30 seconds, to just give a last word on this topic. It could be a message to other players in the ecosystem, or a message to regulators, or perhaps your view on how you expect things to pan out over the next decade. So maybe we start with Triska this time.
I mean, we couldn't predict what will be happening next month, let alone in the next decade. I'm actually very hesitant to make any kind of predictions going forward, but what we see, I think, is just going to be people becoming far more comfortable with going online and carrying out their services online, and greater connectivity to people. That's going to happen. That's going to drive fintech, e-commerce, and all of these sectors. So 10 years from now, I don't know, if you ask a film director or a movie star, they'll probably come up with visions of flying cars. But with us, I think it's going to be, as you said, today is tomorrow. I think the trends that we're seeing are going to become part of daily life within the next few years.
Okay, Mohammed?
Well, as a message from the telecom operators, I can say that the connectivity, the network, the technology is ready. We are waiting for the other players to come and join us to have the smart city.
Okay, and Yusuf?
Embrace the new norm. So basically, that's it. That's it. We are in tomorrow.
Yeah.
And there are things to be done today to adapt. I think adapt or die remains a theme. Organizations, whether public or private, that are failing to move their course and stop any other projects and focus on the ones that are necessary for today, are gonna get out of this realizing that there is no tomorrow but today. So because they've not done the homework of today, there will not be tomorrow.
Very important message. Thank you so much, Yusuf, Triska, Mohammed, for your very valuable insights today. I will also want to say thank you to AIM and the Ministry of Economy UAE for putting this together, and also to our live audience for your participation. The conversation continues. Feel free to get in touch, with any of the speakers on the issues we've discussed today, or if you want to know more about our respective organizations, our email addresses on the presentation slides that will be shared with you. And I also, have seen some comments. People want to see the responses to the polls. So I think that's something, the organizers, can put together and share with you as well. And from me, it's thank you very much and stay safe. I will now hand back over to AIM.
Thank you so much, Kenti. Thank you, Mohammed. Thank you, Yusuf. Thank you, Trishka, for your time today. And thank you for sharing such wonderful insights. And I'd like to thank our audience for joining us. For everybody, to the audience members, to download today's presentation or to register for our next webinar, which is scheduled for the 22nd, you can visit our website, www.aimcongress.com/webinars. Also follow us on our social media channel to keep yourself updated. Thank you once again for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you on the 22nd. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.